Hello everyone, this is Charlie from the Bloomingdale Public Library, and today's video is all about raising awareness for Windows accessibility. Basically, this video is going to just be me demonstrating what happens when you flip some toggle switches and move around some sliders in Windows settings. So it should be a pretty short video. That said, there are a couple of tools that have their own online manuals in their own right. So for those, we're just going to be tipping our toes in, checking where the manual is, and moving on. So again, awareness, demonstrations, short video. Let's move on. So what is Windows accessibility? Windows accessibility is a collection of tools and options built into Windows to help users with disabilities or impairment. Even for someone like me who is relatively able-bodied, there are some settings in here that I like toggling on and off. Windows accessibility is found in Windows settings, but many tools can also be toggled on and off on the sign-in and lock screens. Windows accessibility focuses on visibility, hearing, and interactivity. So here's an overview of what we can do in the accessibility settings. So for vision, we can do some enlarging text, icons, and the mouse pointer. There's a magnifier tool and a narration tool. And there's also color options for color blindness, low vision, and light sensitivity. For hearing, we have mono audio and audio notifications, as well as live captions options. And then for interactivity, there's voice typing, keyboard and mouse options, and there's also eye control with eye tracking. I do not have an eye tracker, so we will not be looking at that one today. Alright, so let's go ahead and have a look at the Windows accessibility settings. To do that, I'm going to minimize my PowerPoint and then click on the Windows Start menu icon. And what that is the little picture of a window in the taskbar all the way on the left side. When I click on that, I see settings right there, but if you don't see it, you can go ahead and click on the All button in the top right corner, and this will give you a list of all of the applications installed on your computer. So they're in alphabetical order, so if you scroll down to S, you'll find the settings there. Go ahead and click on that, and that'll take us to Windows settings. The list of categories are all on the left side, so you see accessibility, third from the bottom. Go ahead and click on that, and here you'll see all the subcategories for accessibility divided into vision, hearing, and interaction. I'm just going to start from the top and work my way down. So starting with text size, there's only one setting here, and that is the text size slider. This is supposed to affect the text size in all of the applications, but in my experience, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it affects the size of images as well, sometimes it doesn't. And a lot of times you'll see mixed results. So just to demonstrate, I'm going to go ahead and take this slider from 100 all the way up to 225. I mean, you can set it to whatever you want. I'm just putting it all the way up for demonstration purposes. When I do that, you can see all of the text in the Windows Settings app has been significantly enlarged. If I minimize settings here, you can see in the desktop the application descriptions are all much larger. However, the icons stayed the same size. If I open up a browser, they all tend to make the images and text much larger. If I open up something like Adobe Acrobat Reader, however, absolutely nothing has changed. So again, your results will vary depending on the application. I'm going to go back to settings, put the text size slider all the way back to 100%, click apply, and we're back to normal. So if it's the case where your application isn't being affected by the text size slider, what you can do is go to the system settings and click on display, and then under scale and layout, go ahead and click on the drop down menu for the scale, and you see it's at 125% by default, but we can go down to 100 and up to 175, which isn't as high as the text size slider, but I think you'll find it's more universally implemented. So you see, once I select 175%, everything instantly got bigger. If I minimize settings, you can see the icons and the descriptions all were affected. And if I open up Adobe Acrobat Reader, you can see, again, everything is actually affected this time. I have seen some people increase the scale and the text size, making some things absolutely monstrous, but I'm not going to demonstrate that right now. Instead, I'm going to go back to 125%. And as a kind of last resort, if you needed to make things bigger, what you can do is lower the resolution. Just keep in mind when you lower the resolution, if the height and width ratio is different from what you started at, you're going to get some distortion. And if you go too far low, things are going to start to look pixelated. On a plus side, you might actually get a performance boost, so there's that. Otherwise, I think it's time to go back to accessibility and start to look at visual effects. There's a couple things we can look at here. The first one here is always show scroll bars. I believe this is off by default, so we'll start with it off. And this will affect the scroll bars on any window that implements the Windows scroll bar. So I'm going to go to the apps list just because I know that's got a scroll bar there. And you see by default you don't see it. If you roll over the window, you see a little sliver on the right side. And then when I roll over that little sliver, only then do I see the full scroll bar. Now if I were to turn this always show scroll bars setting on and go back to that app list, now no matter where my mouse pointer is, that scroll bar always shows. Honestly, I kind of like having the setting on. The next setting is transparency effects. This just shows a subtle transparency effect in the taskbar and maybe a couple other windows. Back in Windows 7, it was actually recommended to turn this off because of the performance hit, but nowadays I don't think it really matters. It's just a matter of preference. So you'll notice right now the taskbar is completely gray. If I turn that on, now you can kind of see some yellow and orange to reflect the wallpaper. At the same time, if I were to open up our web page here and start going back and forth over the scroll bar, you'll see that sure enough you see the teal come through. If I were to open up the start menu, again you can kind of see the teal peeking through. So it's a subtle effect. Again, I don't think there's really much of a performance hit anymore, so it's just a matter of preference. I prefer to have it off personally. The last one is animation effects. I know this affects how moving windows around and resizing them happens. Otherwise, I'm not sure what else it really affects. So, in other words, when I go to minimize the settings window, it kind of shrinks into the taskbar. And when I open it, you can see it grow. Also, if you start moving things around, again, it kind of shrinks and grows. If I turn that off, though, and now I go to minimize, it's just kind of instantaneous. There is no shrinking and growing. So it's up to you what you prefer. Otherwise, I'm kind of having trouble fighting with the snap functionality here. I actually prefer to have it on, though. Last setting in visual effects is the dismissing notifications after this amount of time. By default, if you don't touch your notifications that appear in the lower right corner, for things like Windows updates and antivirus scans, it's going to disappear in 5 seconds. Like I said, otherwise you can usually click on something to make it go away instantly. Otherwise, if you want them to stay on the screen a little bit longer, maybe to take your time to read it, you can increase it up to 5 minutes. I'm just going to leave it at 5 seconds for now, though. And that's all for visual effects. Next up, mouse pointer and touch. Now, I didn't realize it after my first recording, but you can't actually see how this affects my mouse pointer. So I'm just going to describe what happens. So by default, you have a white mouse pointer with a black outline. The other options are black with white outline, inverted colors, which is a cool effect, but you can't really appreciate it unless you have a larger mouse pointer. And then the fourth guy here is custom colors. So if I click on that, I think you can at least see where you can choose new colors. And if you don't like anything offered, you can click on the plus sign to choose your own custom color. And that's how that works. Other than that, we have size. It goes up from 1 up to 15, which if you do that, you will never lose your mouse pointer again. However, I know that it doesn't show up in the recording, so that kind of sucks. But definitely have a look at that one. I know a lot of people that increase it to like 4 or 5, just again to help them see it and not lose their mouse pointer. And then the last guy here is the touch indicator. I actually do have a touch screen, so it's off right now. You can't see when I'm touching the screen. If I turn it on, at least in my experience, I still don't see when I touch the screen. However, if I check this box here to make the circle darker and larger, now you can definitely see where I touch the screen. And that's all that does. I'm going to turn that off for now. And again, it kind of sucks that I can't really demonstrate this because it doesn't show up on the recording, but definitely just go ahead and have a look on your own. And in the meantime, we're going to move on to the text cursor. So this text cursor bunch of options here helps you see where your text cursor is. If you turn it on, you'll get these little colorful handles on the top and bottom of your cursor. Like over here to find a setting, you can see over on the left side here now I've got handles on my cursor. You can make those handles bigger and smaller, change their colors. Again, there's an option for custom colors if you like. Make it red. And you can also change the cursor thickness. So it starts off as just a skinny little line, but as you increase the size with the slider on the right, it eventually gets to the point where it covers about 2.5 characters, which I think can be kind of confusing. If you do choose to do that, just remember that you're actually on the left edge of whatever kind of cursor you choose. So if I click up here in the find a setting here, it's the left edge that you're typing at. And that is the first half of the vision settings in the accessibility settings. Alright, so next up is the magnifier. When I click on magnifier, you see we have a whole bunch of options here. The first toggle is to toggle the magnifier on and off. You'll also notice in the verbiage here that they list the shortcut keys. So to turn it on is Windows key and the plus sign key. To turn it off is the Windows key and the escape key. Below that is the zoom level. So this will be what the magnification starts at. Goes up and down in increments of 100. If you wanted to change that, you can do so with the drop down just below it. So you can go in as small of increments as 5% and as big as 400%. I'm going to leave it at 100% for now. There's also various views. I believe full screen is the default, but we also have docked and lens, which we'll have a look at. And below that, we have more about the magnifier. If we click on that, it'll take you to the internet, as long as you have a connection, and it will show you all the various things you can do with the magnifier. All that said, let's go ahead and toggle the magnifier on. You'll see once I do, the screen is entirely zoomed in. If you do a little bit of searching, you can find the magnifier toolbar. Again, we can do increments of 100%. This rectangle here will zoom back out. The double-sided arrows will zoom in. And the rest of these buttons here are for the reader. It's not quite as verbose as the narrator, but I'll go ahead and demonstrate it real quick.
Magnifier.
It's reading the magnifier window. If we use this icon here, you click on that and then click on what you want read.
More about magnifier.
And that's how that works. Under the gear, we have options for the speed, as well as a couple of other voice options. I'll let you look at those on your own. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and close the magnifier, and we'll look at these other views real quick. Docked view will basically split the screen. So the bottom of the screen acts normally, where the top shows a zoom in centered around the mouse pointer. If you click and drag on the dividing point there, you see you can make the dock bigger or smaller. I'm going to switch to the lens view. And when I do that, you see I have a magnifying glass that centers around the mouse pointer. Under appearance, if you click that on, you see it inverts the colors and what that looks like. I'm going to turn that off. There's also smooth edges of images and text. So if you leave that on, it's supposed to be trying to round the corners out when you start zooming in a bit. So you see everything looks kind of dithered. I don't know if that's helpful or not. Otherwise, if we turn that off, things might look a little bit more jaggedy. So that's what that does. And below that, there's some reading options for the reader. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off real quick. It lists a bunch of commands. The commands are issued with the shortcut key and another key. So when it says shortcut key, it's referring to what's in this drop-down box. So for starting and stopping, you would do Control, Alt, and Enter. Otherwise, if you were to use the drop-down box to change that to Caps Lock, now it would be Caps Lock and Enter. And you can see the rest of those commands there. That's all I want to talk about with the magnifier, though, so let's go ahead and back out. And next up is color filters. So color filters are for helping with various forms of color blindness. If you toggle it on, you can see how the effect will appear with the images just above. So depending on your color blindness, this should help you see a bit better. We also have some grayscale options as well. So with the non-grayscale options, we also have some toolbars, some sliders here below it. We've got intensity, which doesn't seem to do much with that particular option, at least for me. If I change to the next one down, though, I see a bit more extreme of an effect. Likewise, there's also a color boost slider as well. You can reset to the defaults with the reset button there. And you also have shortcut keys as well, which I think is off by default. But if you turn the toggle keys on for the color filters, now Windows key plus Control plus C will toggle the color filters on and off. I'm going to turn that back off. Turn the color filters off. Back out. And next we'll look at contrast themes, which is kind of similar, except instead of adjusting for color blindness, it's for contrast issues. So to change the contrast themes, you go to this drop-down box here, choose from one of the 4 options, and click Apply. You can see what effect that has. I actually kind of like that effect. If I change to Desert, that's what we get. And there's Dusk. If you like, you can click on the Edit button and change the colors that you see. I'm not going to do that right now, though. I'm going to change everything back to none. Click Apply. And there we go. Last up for the vision section is the narrator. Now, the narrator is a very robust tool. I'm just going to have a quick peek at it here. To actually use the narrator takes a lot of customization and practice. After I explain some of these settings here, I'll go ahead and turn the narrator on and move the mouse pointer around, and you can kind of hear how it says a lot. Depending on the verbosity settings, it'll explain what's going on in addition to what text is on the screen. And again, how much you want read to you depends on your preferences and needs. So the first toggle is to turn the narrator on and off. If you click on the setting, you see there's also options to turn the narrator on before and after you sign in. That's going to pull up the admin sign in, so I'm going to leave those blank for now. The next toggle is, again, to turn the shortcut keys on and off. If you have it on, you see it is Windows key, Control key, and Enter to toggle the narrator on and off. Below that, we have the narrator home screen. If that's toggled on, it means the narrator home screen will come up when you turn on the narrator. It can be helpful if you're still getting used to the narrator. Otherwise, it might just be getting in your way, so you can toggle that off and it'll skip the home screen. I'm going to leave that on for right now. And if you really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of the narrator, you can go ahead and click on the complete guide to the narrator. And as long as you have an internet connection, it will pull up the web page here, and you can see there's a whole bunch of chapters for learning how to use the narrator. So below that, you have options for the voice, customizing and choosing your voices. Again, there's the verbosity level, which will explain what's going on, as well as reading the text. So if something is loading, it'll say it's loading. If there's a context to the text you're looking at, it will say that as well. I believe 3 is the default for both of these. And it goes on with mouse and keyboard options, cursor options, braille, etc. So with that all said, I'm just going to go ahead and turn the narrator on and move the mouse pointer around a bit.
Set scan. Narrator window heading level 1. Welcome to narrator. This is narrator home, where you can get help. Access settings window. Narrator. Toggle switch on. Scan off. Taskbar pane. Start. Button. Off. Scan. Home. Image. Link. My account link. Calendar link. E-newsletter sign up link. Contact edit. Button. Search options website. Radio button. Non-selected. 2 of 2. Taskbar pane. Scan off. Settings exiting narrator.
So I think you get the point. Again, it's very verbose, and you probably want to mess with the settings to get everything the way you like. But with that all said, that's all there is to the vision section. Next, we'll have a look at some of our hearing options. Okay, so the next section is hearing. Before I move on, I just want to say that I reviewed my recording for color filters and noticed that a lot of the options were not coming through. So I apologize for that and encourage you to play around with them on your own. With that said, let's go ahead and click on audio. Under audio, there are 2 settings. There is mono audio and then flashing my screen during audio notifications. So for mono audio, what that does is it combines the left and right audio channels into one. So if you had trouble hearing in your left ear, but you were listening to stereo content through headphones, you're only going to get half the content. If you turn on mono audio, that will give all audio through all channels, so then you'll be able to hear all the content in your right ear. Incidentally, this can be helpful if one of your speakers isn't working. Below that is flash my screen during audio notifications. It is off by default. If I click on the drop down, you see there's a couple of options here. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate the flash the entire screen. And I'm going to trigger the audio notification by unplugging my mouse. You'll see when I do that, the whole screen goes to inverted color. Typically, it just flickers. For some reason, when I unplug the mouse, it sticks until I do something like press the Windows key. So once I do that, I get my colors back. I'm going to go ahead and plug my mouse back in. Same thing. I hit the Windows key to get my colors back. Next up is hearing devices. Unfortunately, as you can see, my PC does not support the Bluetooth low energy audio hearing devices. We can go ahead and click on learning more about it though. And when I do that, it takes us to the web page where it explains that this is to help your devices run longer on a charge with increased audio quality and reduced latency. On this page, they explain a little bit more about how it works and how to set it up. And I'll let you go ahead and read all of that on your own. So from there, we'll go ahead and move on to captions. On this page, you can see we have a theme preview here. So when we go down to caption style, we can go ahead and customize our caption box a little bit. So we have white on black, small caps, yellow on blue, etc. I'll set it back to default. Incidentally, you can also customize it with the edit button here. You can see there's options for changing the text color, background color, window color, as well as opacity options as well. I'm not going to mess around with that right now. I will, however, toggle the captions on. When I do that, you see I get a little window up at the top here. And there is a gear for adjusting some of these settings as well. So you can change the position, change the language. Under preferences, you can even filter profanity. I'm just going to leave all that alone for now. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up some of my recording. Okay, so the next section is hearing. Before I move on, though, you can see up at the top that, sure enough, it is transcribing what I'm saying into text. Incidentally, this will also work if you mute the computer. However, if I mute the computer, for some reason, the video audio still comes through, so I'm not going to demonstrate that. I'm going to go ahead and X out. And that is all we have with regards to the hearing section. All right, so the last section is interaction. So I'm going to go ahead and click on speech. Incidentally, you can probably tell I'm starting to lose my voice, so I'm going to be pretty quick from here on out. Under speech, we have voice access and voice typing. Incidentally, voice access does have voice typing as well. Under voice access, you can see the shortcut keys, which is Windows key, Control S, and we have the same options we had with the narrator. I'm going to go ahead and toggle voice access on. And when I do, you see I get a new little bar at the top. The first time you're going to have a little bit of a setup, but it's not a big deal. Voice access doesn't actually turn on right away. Instead, you have to either say the phrase or click on the microphone in the top left corner. On the other side of the bar here, you've got a gear that shows a couple different settings that I'm not going to get into today. This is also where you turn it off. Under the question mark, there's a couple more things for learning about how to go ahead and use voice access. I'm just going to click on view all commands for right now. And this is where you see all the things you can say to Windows in order to interact with it. So there's quite a bit there. You can flow through that on your own. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and do a brief demonstration. Voice access, wake up. Open Word. Click blank document. Hello, my name is Charlie. Close Word. Click Don't Save. And there you go. Voice typing is, it's just the voice typing piece of voice access. You see the shortcut for that is Windows key H. To demonstrate how that works, I'll just go ahead and open Notepad. And I'm going to hit Windows key H. And when I do, you see it turns on and gives us this little window. When I click the microphone, it stops listening. We have a little gear here with a couple of options. And again, the question mark will take us to the help page. And you can see how to use voice typing. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. X out. Close Notepad. So that is voice access and voice typing. Next up is keyboard. There's a couple of things here. Some of these you might have stumbled upon by accident, but we have sticky keys, filter keys, and toggle keys. So sticky keys allows you to do shortcut combinations one key at a time. The example they give here is Control S, so that's usually to save. So instead of holding Control and then pressing S and hitting both keys at the same time, you can just do one at a time. If I click the little arrow here, you see there's a couple more options associated with sticky keys, including how you might have stumbled upon it, which is with the shortcut here, which is to press the Shift key 5 times. I'll go ahead and do that just to show you what happens. There you go. X out, go back to keyboard, and next we'll look at filter keys. Filter keys keep you from accidentally hitting the same key more than once in succession. So if you have slower fingers or maybe a little bit of a shake, this will keep it from hitting the same key over and over again. If I hit the arrow here, again, there's some options associated with filter keys, Again, including the shortcut, which is how many of you might have stumbled upon it. If you just hold down the right shift key for 8 seconds, I'll go ahead and do that. You get something like that. I'm going to X out. These unselected options here are for setting a timer for how long in between key presses or how long a key can be held down and only count as a single stroke. So I turn it on, click the down arrow. You see there are options in the drop down for how long these durations last. And what you need to set it on depends on your own preferences. So that's filter keys. Toggle keys is simple enough. It just makes a noise when you hit the caps lock or num lock. If I turn that on, hit the num lock. And there you go. And depending on whether you're turning it on or off, it makes a different tone. Notification preferences, that's what makes the noise and brings up the window when we turn any of these on. I prefer to have that on just in case you do something by accident. You'll know why things are going weird. Below that we have the on-screen keyboard. You toggle that on. Sure enough, you get an on-screen keyboard. Definitely more useful if you have a touchscreen. Underline access keys, I'm not even going to worry about that. In my experience, it tends to be on by default. And then the last option here is the print screen key to open screen capture. So screen capture is basically like the new snipping tool. So if I hit the print screen key now with it on, you see it brings up this little snipping tool bar up here. I actually made a video on this already on the channel. If I turn that off, instead it's just going to take a screenshot and put it on the clipboard. So if I hit print screen, open up Paint, I can paste it just like that. That's all for the keyboard. After that is the mouse. And the mouse accessibility options is basically entirely built on using the numpad as a substitute for the mouse. So when it's on, you have the numpad where 8 is up, 2 is down, 4 is left, 6 is right, and you have the diagonals available to 2 as well. So I'm going to put the mouse pointer here, right here at the top. I'm going to hold down the 6 on the number pad, and you see it slowly starts to take off. We've got sliders here to increase the acceleration and speed. I'm going to go ahead and boost both of these up a bit. So now when I hit the 6 on the number pad, it starts moving quite a bit faster. Just above the slider, we also have options for the control and shift keys to speed up and slow down the mouse cursor. So I'm going to go ahead and hit shift as the mouse cursor goes. Oh, it would help if I turned it on first. Alright, so I'm hitting the 4 key, and after a while I'm going to hit shift. I think you can see when I hit it. Alright, now I'm going to hit the 6 on the number pad key, and I'll hit shift really quickly after. Alright, now I'm going to hit 4, and this time I'm going to use control. You see it just kind of takes off. So that is mouse keys in a nutshell. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And that brings us to our last setting here, which is eye control, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video. I do not have an eye tracker, so I will not be able to demonstrate this. I do, however, have a slide, so I'll go ahead and put that up real quick. Eye control uses sensors to detect what you are looking at in order to use various tools on the eye control launchpad, like an on-screen mouse, keyboard, or text-to-speech feature. There are various types of sensor devices you can use with Windows, including a sensor bar, glasses, or a monitor with sensors built in. So on the left side here, we have what the eye control launchpad looks like. You see all the options available to you. And on the right, we have an example of the eye tracking glasses. You can kind of see there's little sensors all around the rims, but otherwise there are other options as well, like they say the sensor bar or a monitor with sensors. And with that, that is all I have for Windows accessibility settings for today. I appreciate you watching. I hope you learned something, and I hope you have a good day.